My name is Elizabeth McIntyre. I'm the co-director of ScreenCraft Works, and we are an organisation of cross-border mentoring, cross-border talks and cross-border networking. And we have a particular remit to support production and post-production talent that considers themselves underrepresented. A really big thank you to our supporters, Genelec, and to Brunel University London, who are the sponsors for our mentoring scheme. With no further ado, I would like to hand to Christopher Chow.
Hi, everyone. Firstly, I'll introduce myself. I am Christopher Chow, and I am a Chinese man in my 40s, so my hair is getting quite gray, and I have wear glasses. And I'm a film and TV editor based in London.
Hi, my name's Rachel Erskine. I live in Scotland. I am a white female with a short blonde bob. No grey hairs yet, but I'm sure they'll be coming soon.
Hi, my name is Sourath Behan, and I am a Muslim brown hijabi woman. And I am a film and TV editor and a colorist based in Karachi, Pakistan. And I have been working in the industry for almost 9 years, 10 years. And I also happen to be one of the very few women editors in Pakistan.
Rachel, would you like to talk, tell us about what you like about editing and how did you get in?
So I got in via an apprenticeship, which was really good. I got that through my university that I was studying in, and I got a job as an apprentice assistant editor. So I went through the route of assistant editor, assembly editor, and then finally editor. It was a bit of a long journey, but got there in the end. And I instantly took to editing. I just loved that it was kind of almost one of the sort of final parts of the puzzle, everything that comes to you, technically that's everything that you've got, and you just have to make the best out of what's there. I sort of quickly realized other departments weren't for me. I'm not good at organizing other people, so that ruled out production. I much prefer being in a sort of nice setting. I don't think I would enjoy being on set all day, and I just kind of fell into it. The more I've done it, I've loved it. I loved being an assistant, I loved being an assembly editor, and now I'm absolutely loving being an editor, and I've enjoyed the journey as well. It's been brilliant. How about you, Chris?
I kind of, it's weird how I got in, because I've always thought myself more like a science person. So I did a psychology degree, and then one day I just woke up thinking that I want to be a filmmaker. And so I went to film school, and I feel like that's where my kind of upbringing merged together, the science background and the art, where I feel that this is like editing. It's where I can do all of that stuff. It can be techie, and then I can be creative and telling stories. And I actually wanted to be a screenwriter, but then turns out I'm not as good as screenwriter, but I'm better editor, which kind of makes sense. Like you said, this last piece of the puzzle, the last part of the writing. And so it kind of works out that way. You
just get to rewrite the scripts later on.
Yeah, exactly.
In the edit.
Especially in documentaries, I've done some documentaries, and with the amount of footage, you're literally just writing it as you go. Yeah. And so how about you, Sourath?
It's interesting, Chris, because I might have a similar story. So I was a pre-med student when I was younger, but I was this shy introvert kid, but I loved drawing and painting. And I remember my dad one time said that, why do you want to pursue medicine? Why don't you go into something that's close to what you do, do something that's art related? And so I went to a film school in Pakistan, and I did 4 years of filmmaking from there. And I really fell in love with the technical side of filmmaking, whether it be, shooting with a camera or editing on Premiere. And so I was really lucky to get an internship right after I got out of film school. So I started off as a post-production supervisor. And so I got to work with an editor really closely. And, my love for editing, it just, it grew by the day. And then I was asked to, like, I was promoted to a post-production supervisor on that same project. And later on, when the lead editor got busy with something, I was asked to like become the second editor on that same film. And I ended up spending 1.5 years. And while I was doing that, I also, for the same director, who's also my mentor, I edited a lot of commercials and music videos. So even though I had the basics done when I was in film school, a lot of the stuff that I learned was on the job. And, and that's, people are always looking for, acquiring a skill set, but you can always learn on the job. That's what I did.
Your dad was so encouraging.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like most parents would really hang on to the free medicine,
Yeah, my dad was really cool in that way.
Yeah. No, that's
I think
amazing.
a lot of parents, they don't understand what we do, like in terms of editing or just anything that is behind the scenes, unless you're on screen, like an actor. Like they don't care.
Honestly, that's amazing. My parents did the opposite. They were like, you should do science. Science. But it's interesting hearing everybody's kind of different journeys. Like there is no right way to do it. And like you said, I think learning on the job is just so much better. Like
especially nowadays, like it's so easy to research online and see, like watch YouTube tutorials. So you will learn while you're on the job, and then doing your own kind of research in your free time and learning constantly. And then it just keeps getting better and better.
Yes. And I think one drawback for me was that I never got a chance to work as an AE, as an assistant editor. And so while I was asked to work on that film as an editor, a lot of times I used to get stuck because I was very creative, but my technical knowledge wasn't like that great. So there was a lot of trial and error involved in the process. And I learned through that, there were a lot of times when I used to get stuck. Oh my God, what am I going to do? But it eventually used to work out. But I think that's okay. Everyone has their own journey. But I think for me, like whoever's working with me, under me, I try to like tell them whatever it is that I've learned so that I can make their lives easier, because I don't want them to go through the same pain that I went through.
I didn't start off my career as an assistant editor. When I started, I couldn't get any work. I couldn't get any work in post-productions. And so I started doing more filming. And so I could have something to edit. Then I got hired as a camera operator, making some short documentaries, and then I would edit them as well. And so then I start building my portfolio.
That's amazing though, just getting yourself out there. You couldn't get any editing jobs, so you literally sort of created your own. That's amazing.
In terms of the internet, like we're talking about like 16 years ago. So there were not a lot of jobs being posted online. You don't know where to look for work, and I didn't know many people. Like coming out from film school, I didn't really know that many people. So it took a while to get the momentum.
Oh, absolutely. And like I've found as well, kind of stepping from role to role, you end up being really established as an assistant editor. You could be sort of quietly confident that, work would come, but, then when you step up to the next role, you're not starting again, but you're having to sort of like reinvent yourself in this new role and start putting yourself out there again. That's one thing that I've found tricky, but if you guys didn't have to make that jump, that's perfect.
But I personally feel that I also missed out on the opportunity of learning from someone experienced and, learning from their experience, because otherwise I would have avoided being through that trial and error method. Sometimes it would just give me a lot of stress on the job. If for instance, if I'm the only person in my team and there's nobody else to look up to. So I think it has its own benefits, but I guess, it is what it is.
No, absolutely. Even just having somebody else there to bounce ideas off just makes such a difference. Just some moral support. Yeah, no, I've definitely been very fortunate to learn from some very, very good editors. So I have been lucky, and my apprenticeship, I was trained up quite well as an assistant, I feel. So I had a very good base, which was lucky. Starting in Scotland, there wasn't as much work sort of 10 years ago, but now it's looking up as kind of work is moving out of London and more into the regions as well, which has been very good.
Yeah, I think that's a really good timing for maybe Rachel. Like maybe you can show your clip and then talk about like how you got into the industry at the beginning.
So you have to find the 3 brightest lights there that make the triangle.
These ones.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the Milky Way is. It's good to get back on the road again, don't you think? But how about just exploring the outer regions of 5th gear? How are you? I thought we'd have a party. I'm on the edge. All right. If you had one wish in the world, what would it be?
I wish this holiday wouldn't end.
This was a very important job for me. This was the first time I was ever sort of hired as an assembly editor on a full job. Previous to this, I'd been hired like for a week or 2 weeks just to cover people, but this was the first time I was hired to do the whole job. So it was very scary, and we were out in the Lake District doing it, and it was brilliant. This was the kind of moment where I realized that it's time to try and step up and slowly start to leave the assistant editor work behind, try and get more assembly work, and then start progressing towards editing. But I think because I've really enjoyed each job as I've done it, that's why I've taken so long to move to the next role. But I think that's a really important part of the journey. I think a lot of people, when they're in certain roles, are just kind of looking to the next role, looking forward all the time instead of kind of enjoying where you're at. But this was a moment where I thought, yeah, I need to keep pushing and keep moving forward with the editing just for me. So that was a very important job for me.
How do you find like going from like assisting to assembly editing? What's the difference that you found?
Well, it was very strange having an assistant editor. And I found it kind of hard asking someone else to do things for me, just because I knew how to do it myself. And yeah, it was almost kind of, you didn't want to sort of bother anyone or ask anyone to do things for you. But when the rushes start coming in and you're drowning in scenes, soon you quickly leave that behind and start, asking for support when you need it. But it was good. It was just, you have to kind of, you're just thinking of everything in a different way, like you said really nicely earlier, it's kind of like a mix of like science and art. Like the assistant editor is very technical, you're making sure everything's set up for the editor. You're also making sure everything's technically okay. And as the assembly editor, you still need to keep an eye on all of this, but your focus is what's been shot. Have they covered the scene? Do we need anything else? Do we have to report back to set? So it's a bit of a mindset change, which just was a good thing for me, for sure.
I absolutely love the film. I think it's like the end of the trailer saying that they wish the journey wouldn't end. I feel like I wish the film wouldn't end because it's just such a lovely film.
It was a really good experience working on it. I loved it. I really did.
Sourath, do you want to introduce your clip and we'll play and watch it?
Beat me. Beat me. Beat me. Beat me. Beat me with your fists.
Beat me with your feet.
Beat me with your voice.
And your words.
I can't take the heat.
Can you?
Beat me to the top of the mountains.
Beat me on the ground.
ये तो मैं भी आगे बढ़ो.
करके दिखाओ.
Beat me. Beat me.
Beat me.
Beat me.
Beat me. At life.
हो जाए फिर.
Because I've been waiting to show you I'm unbeatable.
That was amazing.
Thank you. So yeah, I think the reason I wanted to show this particular clip is because it's very true to my editing style, which is very experimental. and non-linear. And because it's like, it's also like, my thought process, there's always so much going on in my mind, so many ideas. I just feel that, when you're working on something, you want to make it extremely emotional and impactful. And, I'm always like looking for different approaches, like, how can I make it more impactful? How can I make it more emotional? So, and I think this PSA came out at a time where there was this statement that was released by a group of people back in 2015, 2016, like, where they said that it's okay to beat women slightly. And, women in Pakistan got really offended that, what do you mean by that? So, so this PSA was kind of sort of like an answer that, yes, beat us, but beat us at stuff that we're good at. And it's also like kind of, I can also relate to it because even when I started off as an editor, I think I did face a lot of discrimination because I'm a woman and, I didn't have a lot of women editors to look up to. And I had my own share of struggles. So like, this particular project, I just gave it my all. So yeah, this is, so that's why I wanted to share this clip.
Your style is very experimental. Like in terms of this, what did you experiment on?
So we had linear structures as well, but when it's like a lot of jump cuts and those flashes. And I think this was supposed to be a color. This PSA was supposed to be in color, and then we decided then we'll make it. I think on edit we decided that we'll make it black and white. So yeah, so we were doing a lot of things that were not on the storyboard or that were not on the script. And my director has been very welcoming and he has been very encouraging. He was always very encouraging. So if I had an idea, he would always go support it and encourage it. So yeah, so instead of like going for a linear narrative, we just went there's a lot of back and forth. If you've seen like you start with one clip and then you see it later again in the segment as well. So yeah, so like the non-linearity happened later on in post.
It was very impactful and very well done. I'm just curious, like as your career has gone on, have you kind of noticed that there's more women in post-production, or would you say it's just the same as when you
Definitely started? So when I started off, I knew 2 women who were primarily directors, but I had always heard that they edited their own stuff. So they weren't primarily editors, they were directors. So I didn't have any women editors to look up to. And but then when I started, I think so recently I've seen more women coming in the field and I'm so glad, but I think we still have a long way to go. And, and that's why I've just decided to stick around, that maybe it'll inspire more women to enter this field, because I think there's this idea that, I think we all have that, women are not technically sound. And I think I also believed that for a very long time until I went to a film school. Because I was shy and because I was an introvert, it was very difficult for me to ask people for help. So, what happened was I ended up picking up my own camera. I ended up editing my own stuff and I really enjoyed the process. And I thought to myself, this is possible, this is doable. And then I had to unlearn that whole idea that, no, women can learn technical stuff. I think I'm still more creative and my technical knowledge is not as sound. But I have become better with time, and I think we're always learning.
Oh, absolutely. No, we're, like we said before, we just have to keep looking forward. And Chris, I'm very curious about what clip you have to show us.
So this is a clip from one of the feature film, indie feature film I cut a couple of years ago. It's called White Color Black, and it was showing premiered at the London Film Festival. And we had a second screening on the closing night, and both screenings were completely sold out. So that is it's a absolute one of my proudest work.
Okay. Right. Rasta.
specifically this film as a whole, it's very interesting because there were maybe like 20, 30 lines of dialogue in the whole film. It's all very visual and quite experimental. And again, it's very low budget, very indie. The director took a team to Senegal and filmed it. I think the first scene is quite an interesting scene where there's only like 2-3 cameras and then 2-3 shots, and then you just have to try and create something, create a relationship, create the emotions from it. And then often as editors, we always like cutting dialogues if we're doing like TV or films, but how do you convey that story without dialogues?
Yeah, I think I love storytelling with not too much dialogue. Something that an editor once told me was that once they've assembled a scene, they watch it back mute just to see what's being conveyed, you know, with the eyes and the emotion and stuff like that. And that's something that I've taken forward, and I've started watching things back mute. And, you know, if you're not getting a sense of the emotion with no dialogue, then something's not quite right. So. But that was a lovely scene, Chris. Like you can tell so much, and like you said, no dialogue. It's the kind of storytelling that I enjoy.
It's one of the earlier feature films that I cut, and so it like my style has changed over time as well. And I can imagine like if I go back like to the same film and then recut it from scratch, it'll be completely different. I think that's what I like, the beauty of like editing, where every editor would cut things differently, and including yourself. Like if you over time you've changed and then you come back to it and you would do it differently.
Adapt to the situation as well. Like I feel like a lot of editors get pigeonholed, like, oh, they only do this, they only do that. But I think, you know, a good editor is able to adapt to any kind of storytelling. People seem to only work in documentary or only work in film, and it's a shame because I think people would miss out on the kind of variety of projects. I think that's kind of changing a little bit more now. I see a lot more kind of crosses between the genres, which is good. Like I hope that I can sort of work across different genres and different types as well. Like, but it seems that you guys have done, you've both done a little bit of both, I think.
Yeah, I think I have done documentaries and films, and with a bit of commercials and music videos. And I think I'll just add to, you know, that point where you need to adapt to different kind of stories. I think I learned it the hard way because, you know, initially when I started working and, you know, all the kind of work that my director used to work on, it was all very experimental, and I used to love working on them. And I remember I was working on this one project, and this person had given it to me, and he's like, you know, we just want you to do whatever it is that you like. And I said, okay, sure. So I completely like, you know, sidelined the script. And then I tried to like come up with something different. And I remember that person looking at that cut, and he was a little taken aback. And, you know, he said, thank you. And then he left and then I was a little confused. I was like, why did that happen? But then I also realized that, you know, when you're trying to tell somebody else's story as editors, it's our job to like, you know, help the director, you know, tell his vision. And you have to do it their way. And it's something that I learned after a very long time, you know, because I was really lucky, very fortunate to have a director whose style suited, you know, my, you know, whose narrative style was very similar to like, you know, my narrative sense. I think I wasn't really open to like experimenting with like, you know, the linear side of, you know, narrative filmmaking. But I think later on I learned. And then I think, you know, you should always be open to like experiment with different storytelling styles.
But what about, because I was born in Hong Kong and I grew up watching a lot of Hong Kong films, and at the same time, a lot of American films. So I feel like I get a lot of influences from kind of the Western and then also the Asian culture. Then I grew up here and then started watching more Japanese films as well. And then they have a different styles. Like, you know, like you when you watch a film, it doesn't matter like what the people look like. You know, the filmmakers, they are different. They are from different background, different culture.
I worked on a film called A House in Jerusalem, which was shot entirely in Palestine. that was, you know, an area that I didn't really know too much about, and I wasn't really sure if like the style was going to be different or the way things were approached were different. And I just kind of did my research like on the area and stuff beforehand, and I think that kind of helped me kind of understand the culture a little bit more as well. And I think if you're working on something like that, you just have to be honest, and if there's something that maybe doesn't land with you or you're not sure, just ask the people who are there, you know.
I personally think that, you know, I think our emotions really drive the story, and I think that's what we connect with. It doesn't matter where the film is from. So it's like, for instance, if you're watching a separation from Iran, or you're watching In the Mood for Love, you know, there are, you don't know the language, but even if you watch the film, there's something that they make you feel something. And I think emotions come into play. And I think when the cultures, I think the influence is there, but I think it's the emotion that drives the narrative. And for me, I think that is where the connection comes from.
Do you think there is a reason for certain style from different cultures? As an example, like if you specifically watch like Japanese films, a lot of them are either very intense octane kind of crazy editing, and then or like everything's like really slow, really dragged on. And I never quite understand why there's such a distinctive style.
Yeah, I'm not sure what drives that actually. Like, you know, it's a very good point. Something I've never really thought about much before. I suppose it's one of these things that if there's a film from a certain region or country that's a success, like I wonder if other filmmakers and editors maybe just mimic the style, and then it just becomes a kind of common trait.
Sourath, would you like to introduce your next clip?
I'll just give a brief intro about this documentary. This documentary I worked on with a very dear friend of mine last year, and it's about climate change and, you know, how people who have been living in those areas that are affected by climate change and floods, how it affects their livelihoods, and not just, it also affects them mentally. And this little sequence, I remember, was a very important one, because when I was listening about this sequence in the interviews, the character talks about, you know, how they are always, you know, looking out for disasters, you know, and they're trying to minimize, casualties. And, you know, so for example, if there are chances of a flood or an avalanche, they have to evacuate right away. So there are a bunch of people who are always looking out during the night. But for this particular sequence, I didn't have enough footage. There was no footage at all. The only footage that I had was the one with, you know, people with the torchlight. And I felt that, you know, this is a very important sequence for the film. How can I, you know, make it work? And I think after like a couple of days, I then realized that, you know, I have a lot of B-roll that's there. And it was like, you know, footage from, you know, it was like daylight footage. And I was like, maybe I can make it work with a bit of sound design and, day for night kind of, graded in a way that it's like day for night footage. And that's what I did. And my director was really happy. And she was like, you know, you made it work. I was like, yeah. So I think, you know, as editors, most of the times we have to have that, you know, solution oriented approach. We always need to like look for solutions, because, you know, sometimes you will not have enough stuff and you need to figure out, you know, how can you make it work with the limited footage or, you know, material that you have.
हम इस एरिया में 50 सालों से ले रहे हैं। फ़र्ज़ करें कि मौसम अचानक ख़राब हो गया है, तो इसमें हमें पता है कि अगर आइंदा 48 या 72 घंटे तक ये मौसम इसी तरह से ख़राब रहे तो इस नाले से सैलाब आने के चांसेस है, या सर्दियों में एवलांच का ख़तरा है। ऐसी सिचुएशन में एक तरह से कि गाँव के जो नौजवान हैं उनको एक तरह से एक ड्यूटी दी हुई होती है, तो उसको रात को टार्च लेके एक रखाली करनी पड़ती है कि भाई अगर वहाँ से रातफल हो तो हम घर वालों को बता सके, या सैलाब आ रहा है या अगर एवलांच का खतरा हो तो हम घर वालों को बता सके कि भाई आवाज़ें आने लगी, आप घर से बाहर निकलें।
You would never know that most of that was just B-roll. Like it all looked very intentional.
Thank you.
Do you sort of seek out projects that are like important topics for you, or has it just kind of happened that way?
I think I've just been very lucky because I think the kind of people who come to me, I think they kind of know what kind of projects appeal to me. So I think that's the kind of project that I get. I think I've just been very fortunate.
I've only done scripted, so I feel like nothing has a more powerful message really than a documentary. I'd love to watch that one.
On the other hand, I started with scripted and I did 4 years of scripted, and then I switched to documentary. And I think I personally never thought I will get into documentary editing. I wasn't really fond of documentary editing. I didn't like it very much. But I think 5 years later, when I started doing it, I was like, oh, I absolutely love documentary editing. And, here I am, I'm doing a little bit of both.
Do you have a preference?
Not really. I think if you had asked me this question like a couple of years ago, I would have definitely said scripted. But I think I absolutely enjoy both of them now.
Depends on the story, doesn't it? I imagine, like,
for sure, it's definitely the story.
Like I can imagine there's nothing more like powerful than working on a topic which is really like important to you personally.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I think like people often talk about you don't know what the editors, can't really tell what's good editing because you don't know what they went through behind the scenes to make that scene work, make that film work. And like what you just like talked about, how you made that and taking on the challenge of doing something that wasn't there and then creating it. I think that's just magic.
Casualty. This is DCI Amy Silva.
Earlier today, crewman died on board Vigil.
How are you with confined spaces? I'm going to need someone who can radio me leads.
I was also the assembly editor on this job as well, and I chose this clip because it's so different to Supernova. As you can see, it's a TV drama, so you have to think about other episodes and what other editors are dealing with as well, and think of it as a whole piece rather than a whole section of pieces rather than just one contained film. Definitely not as emotional as Supernova, so a different cutting style. This job was all about kind of looks, red herrings, suspicion, which was great. Like I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that as well, but very different style, and you just adapt to it.
What I'm doing lately now is more for TV, because it's taken me a long time to get to now being editing for TV. Again, it's the same thing at the beginning where I couldn't get into TV. It's just impossible. Like it's always like you always have to have your first job in order to get the second one. But if you never manage to get your first step in there, you can't get in. And so a couple of years ago, I stepped down as an assistant to work on a TV show, and then that allowed me to then continue working for a couple more TV shows in UK, and then finally last year I was able to get an agent and then started getting work for TV.
No, I think it's very interesting because I feel, when we're talking about influences and, cutting styles, I think most of the times it's the story that dictates the style of, on the editing table. And, what's the best way to tell a particular story.
It's great that you weren't afraid to, I don't like using the term like step down, but, step to the side and into another role in order to sort of get to where you want to be. Like, I think that's very admirable. Like a lot of people wouldn't want to do that. And I think it's a brilliant way to approach things. And I know a few other people who've sort of managed to do that as well. Just work as an assistant editor for a few years to get those connections to then be able to step back up to edit. I'm glad that worked out for you.
Yeah, luckily. But I was kind of like because I kind of got to a point where I was rather kind of depressed, like my career wasn't really progressing the way it was, and then and also a couple of jobs fell through. And so that was the point where I knew I had to change, I had to do something else. And again, like it was purely by chance that a job that came up, and they were looking for an assistant who had drama experience. It was documentaries, but they were looking for drama experience. And so I had both. And then that's why I managed to get the job.
I might have a question, Chris. Do you think getting an agent helped you with getting better projects? Because that's something that I've been hearing a lot, like even people in US, they have agents, because this is something we don't have in Pakistan.
Yes, definitely. I think in UK, if you have not had a lot of experiences or you don't have a lot of credits, you really need an agent in order for productions to take you more seriously.
Hello, conversationalists. I'm just popping back in to continue it with a few questions that we're getting through from the audience. Do you think that working virtually on a project, if you're working on an international project, for example, does that help with an understanding of different cultures and how we might perceive each other's cultures? Is that helpful when there are those virtual connections between international teams?
I think certainly the virtual aspect has opened more doors to people, working internationally and with different cultures and that kind of thing. Like just going back to A House in Jerusalem, that was done entirely remote, and I don't think it hindered the final product at all. It maybe hindered the speed a little bit. We could have maybe shaved a week or two off the edit, maybe if we'd been in the room. But I think when you connect on a project like this, sort of any kind of cultural barrier kind of just goes away.
How does it work when editing only some episodes of a television series? How do you maintain a consistency between the editors?
Edit 2 episodes of Casualty last year, and that was the whole series. The series is about 30 something episodes, and there were many editors who were working on it, and that's the first time I experienced how all of that worked out. And we were helping each other out in terms of behind the scenes, whether we needed something or we were having questions about certain characters, because obviously we don't know what happens before, after, and we don't have the scripts for them. And so you're just focusing on your own episode. But the execs, the producers, they were really clear. For example, this one scene where I was using close-ups because it's a very intense scene. I was using close-ups, but then the producer came back after viewing and said that maybe we need to hold back. Don't use a close-up there because the character's journey is not over yet. There's further for him for his emotions to go in the future episodes. So we want to just keep it back a little bit, and that was very interesting. That I didn't think okay, now I'm really part of a bigger team, and what I do affects them, they affect me. Yeah, that was fascinating.
What is the difference in workflows when you are working on documentaries and fiction?
That's a very good question. So I remember when I switched from scripted content to documentaries, I remember when I was given footage and I was told that, this is the footage and you have to come up with a narrative on the timeline. And I think that for me was a little nerve-wracking in the beginning. I think the workflow itself is pretty similar. However, for documentaries, you don't really have a script. And also you have to sometimes there's a paper edit that you are given by the producers and directors, but most of the time you are the one who are you're rewriting the story on the edit. And, you're going through a lot of transcriptions that are provided to you. And I think, it's always, it's interesting that, you're trying to coming up with a narrative as you go. And, when with the scripts, you have everything there. So you just have to put it on the timeline. But with documentaries, it's you're figuring things out. You just put everything and then you try to find a narrative within all the material that you have.
I worked in documentaries where we had paper edits and then also the ones that happened. And I think I enjoyed starting with a paper edit because I know what I'm looking for, and then also knowing that things can change. drastically. Like you can, especially like with documentaries, you're constantly discovering like material. You're always like looking for stories, and then sometimes what someone else sees might not be what you think, and then you might find something that is really interesting, fascinating, and then but people don't, like they forget about it, and then so you start rebuilding a whole storyline that works with everything else. Because like in the same way, I think with scripted and documentaries is that as an editor, you need complete understanding of the entire story, and it feels like a whole network of all of these story points, emotions, and how do they work together seamlessly and enhancing each other. And from that aspect, I think it's exactly the same.
I agree. And I think I remember one editor mentioning this somewhere, and he said, always go for, emotion before information. You need to make sure how the audience feels about, whatever sequence it is that's there, and he said that, whenever you're going through the footage, make sure, like, make notes of, how a certain footage or a clip made you feel. And, that might, really help, it might move the audience. So I think that for me was a very useful advice.
How do you change your approach in the edit suite when you go from assistant to editor? I mean, how do you read the room as an assistant? How do you then read the room as an editor? What are those key differences within the role tonally? I'm very fascinated with any job, actually, when you go from one position to another and how you reinvent yourself, how you reposition yourself. It's a very interesting topic to get that right.
Yeah, so one thing that I had to kind of focus on was just not jumping back into the old role because I could do it. If something would come up, I would just be like, oh, I can do that. And I'm like, no, I can do that, but there is somebody else who can also do that. So I had to get really used to kind of sort of delegating tasks to the assistant editor, because you want people to see you editing. You don't want them to see you, assisting yourself, kind of thing. And yeah, this is something that I kind of was speaking to my mentor about, is, making sure you're acting like the head of department role that you're in. And I think it's just embracing it, because as an editor, people come to you with questions, the producer comes to you with questions, the director, and as an assistant, when these questions would come to you, if I couldn't answer them, I'd immediately be like, oh, I'll just go and ask the editor. I'll go and get that answer for you. And, now they come to you, and you just have to embrace it. People are looking to you for advice as the head of department. And, we've all came up through different training and backgrounds and stuff, but we all know it. And I think you just have to sort of be confident and just embrace it, really.
And Sourath, obviously your route, you spoken about having to learn on YouTube, that it was very difficult for you to enter the industry as a woman when predominantly men weren't supporting you. So you were self-taught as well as college, and then on the job. So how did you find going up the ladder? Was it different from Rachel's experience?
I think for me, it was very interesting. I think it happened very naturally to me because when I was working at my previous place, and I had worked for them for like 4 years, and then I felt that things had become really stagnant, and I had learned a lot from them, but I think it was time for me to move on. And then I got a call from my second boss, and she wanted me to come in, when I was working at my previous job, I was single-handedly working, handling the post-production department. I had one friend who used to help me every now and then. But then when I went to the other job, they had an entire edit team, and she wanted me to come in as a senior editor. And that for me, I didn't realize that, even I forgot at one point that I am coming with an amount of experience. At that time, I had worked in the industry for like good 4 or 5 years. And then, it took me time to like just get used to it, that, because when I went in there and I used to work on projects, and there were a lot of times when we had technical issues and I knew the answer because, I had faced it before, and I was like, oh, that's not a problem. We'll just fix it this way. And then, then I realized that, if I have been given this opportunity to lead a team, it's because, I have worked in the industry for so far, and, I come with an experience. And sometimes it's just like, you have to tell yourself that, you have earned it. You have worked long enough to earn the role of the head of a department, for instance. And you also be willing to help, and also don't be shy of asking for help if you're if you get stuck at some place. It doesn't matter if you're the head of the department. I have had amazing editors, junior editors working for me who have helping me with stuff. For instance, if I got stuck somewhere, they would come up with a solution. I was like, oh, thank you so much. I had no idea that this was possible.
I like that very much. And I think that's, we're learning and teaching throughout our entire careers, aren't we? I have to say, yes. If your passion and dream is to become an editor, there are a number of routes to achieve that and then continue to grow and learn. And that's so vital when people can feel frustrated if they don't feel that they are managing to achieve that ambition.
I think on that point with Sourath, what you were talking about earlier, that there are very few women in Pakistan who are editors, and I think in UK there are very few East Asians who look like me who are editors in post-production, and so that's why I founded the Beam Network to connect more people from my background who work together to support each other, because I think it's near impossible to be doing it by yourself if you are not like majority of people who are out there working. And so you have to work together with each other and support each other. And that's it's really important.
I agree. So that's a BEAM. Could you give the website details for people to be able to contact? Would that be?
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, I think we are beam.network.
So how do you build a portfolio of work in order to get experience as an editors when you don't know any directors? So you want to showcase your work in order to get that foot in the door.
I don't have an awful lot to show for my editing, even though I now have sort of 2 feature film credits. Because they're not out yet, I have nothing to show, and a lot of people go down the short film route and edit an awful lot of short films, and you can use that as your portfolio. But I sort of didn't. I really focused on the assembly editor work, but that means that the final edit's not yours. So again, you can't really put that on your portfolio. I would say try and join groups in your area. There's lots of Facebook groups you can join for filmmakers and start putting yourself out there as an editor, because even though you're an editor who doesn't know any directors, there'll be plenty of directors who don't know any editors. So I think it's just trying to immerse yourself in those groups, whether it's in person or online. In Scotland, there's a Scottish filmmakers Facebook group and all sorts of other ones, Assistant Editors London, all these kind of groups. I would say get on there and say that you're willing to edit for people, and hopefully you'll get some hits.
How can you get a foot in the door as a remote editor if you have no direct TV and film experience?
When I did a lot of corporate videos and commercial work, most of it was on remote. I was editing from home. They would send you a drive, and then I could have been anywhere. The only downside was that you have to be close enough so they can send you a drive cheaply. That's the only downside as remote editors in terms of commercial space. For TV and films, it's different. You can work certain amount remotely, and then until people start, they just want to see you.
I think I'll just add to it, because I think I was attending a conference a couple of some time ago, and this editor said that I think more than your resumes and your portfolios, I think word of mouth works the most, because people need to know that they are able to trust you, And, so I think there are all these sessions and conferences happening all the time, by American cinema editors, British film editors. You can always go online. There are these seminars that happen by the name of like Sight and Sound. So you can always go online and, just network with people, let them know. And till you have time, you can work on your skills, learn Premiere, learn Avid. Now you can learn all these skills on LinkedIn. So while you have that time, work on your skills and, just reach out to people, because people they respond but I think you'll have to like keep reaching out to people because, everyone is so busy, but, you never know. One of them might just like respond and you're like, yeah, I have, and, perhaps you can come in as an editor, as an apprentice and, and then you can work your way up.
How did you find work as an assistant editor working on film and TV drama? Was it through word of mouth, picking up on that theme, emailing lots of people? How did you progress? Did it make you feel nervous when making the jump to assembly editing? So I think that is for you, Rachel, but it's reflecting those themes of capacity and word of mouth.
Yeah, a lot of it is word of mouth. So I was really fortunate that the first job that I managed to get onto was a sort of school drama called Waterloo Road. And what's really good about a setup like that is that there's so many editors. It's kind of like what Chris was talking about earlier with Casualty. It's really good to try and get in somewhere where you'll meet, 5, 8 editors and directors. So, and it's quite a fast turnaround. So I kind of met a lot of editors very quickly that way. And I was like really fortunate that 1 or 2 of them were willing to put up with me again and take me on to some other projects. And in the beginning, it was hard. Like there was times where I couldn't get any work. And I just kept sort of trying to keep in touch with people, being willing to do, 1-2 days cover at short notice, the night shift, the dreaded night shift, all of these things. And I definitely was scared making the jump to assembly editor because I was so comfortable as an assistant editor. I was in my element. Most things that came my way, one way or another, would be able to sort them, and I enjoyed the job. And yeah, I was definitely very nervous when I made the jump. But I think a bit of nerves is good for you sometimes. You don't want to get too comfortable, which I definitely was.
I think reach out to other editors because, I think editing is more of a community. You're not competitors. You're more of a community. So, because at one point I had like one man who denied me the mentor, he denied me the mentorship, but I had other amazing male friends who would just like help me out. They were just always a call or a text away, or even my mentor, my director, who gave me the opportunity. So, it's like always reach out to other people, other co-editors, and, learn from each other's experiences. And you never know. Sometimes, for instance, if you're not available, you can always, send the work to somebody else's way, help out each other.
I found like the editing community, it's probably the most friendly and supportive community out there in the filmmaking world. And everyone's online, they're very supportive. And I think that's, like I said earlier, you can't make it by yourself. You have to be part of a community. You need that support, and then in turn, you will give that support to someone else. And so that's for me, definitely go out there online, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and reach out to people and exist. You have to exist in that space for other people to know you exist. And so then, even though you might even talk about like virtual working, because they know you through your internet presence, then you might get some work through there. You never know.
I would say enjoy the stage that you're at now, even though, everyone's looking forward to, even if you're not in the dream job, just try and take the good from it. Because I think if people see you in that kind of positive way, they're more likely to try and help you make the next step.
That's a wonderful note to end on. But thank you very much indeed for attending this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please look out for ScreenCraft Works newsletter and social media for our next events. But thank you very much indeed.